many distractions. Are they really that important? Mary has discovered the one thing most important by choosing to sit at my feet. She is undistracted, and I won't take this privilege from her. The next slide I want you to throw up there is the simple idea, and again, I talk about it all the time, and I'm going to keep talking about it all the time, and that is that God is after heart transformation, not behavior modification. We will always preach the finished work of Jesus in this church. It is finished. And what I love about this is that when Jesus conquered sin, hell, and the grave, he went up to the Father, and the Bible says that he sat at the right hand of the Father. Now, that's cool, and that's awesome, and that means they're together, but it's even more significant than that, because you have to realize that in the temple where the priests served, there were no chairs. There were no seats of any kind. You did not have a seat in the temple. Why? Because in the temple, the work's never done. And that was a symbol for priests that you never sit because you're constantly offering sacrifices. The works that you give to God is ongoingly in the Old Testament. You are never done. And so when Jesus went to the throne room of God and sat down, he was making a humongous statement that no, indeed, the work is finished. And so now we see Mary seated with Jesus saying, listen, there's a lot of work to be done, and we can go off and we can feed the orphans and we can go to the other parts of the earth, but we're going to start in a place where we realize that everything flows from this seated place, that I don't work for my place with Jesus, my status, my acceptance. It's not a works-based religion. It is truly God transforming us on the inside out, and out of that place comes our behavior. Everybody go, we're a community that first and foremost falls in love with Jesus. Just like Mary. Jesus, we're going to find that seat, and we're going to gaze upon your beauty, and we are transformed by beholding you. Don't miss this. We are transformed by beholding him just like Mary. Seated. You will never be transformed because you're trying to keep up with the works of the religious law. That doesn't bring transformation. It brings bondage. You will get tired, and then you'll just be like, I'm done. It's seated, being transformed by Jesus. And so this is why we're a community that loves Jesus. And I'm going to throw this, each point I'm going to throw a stat up there to kind of share with you where we're at and what we've accomplished so far this year. So in 2019, we saw 13 people get water baptized and 10 people accept Christ. Come on. Listen, never in my wildest dreams did I believe that we would have a church alive and well this early. We planted our church in February of 2019. So far this year, we've been in a house, we've been in a Girl Scout facility, we've been in a school, and we've been right here in this place. And God has done amazing things, but it hasn't been through a bunch of people who are trying to work their way into God's good graces. It's been through a people who are grabbing a hold of the reality that God is so good.
Yes.
He loves us so much. And we don't have to earn that. We just have to accept it. And that changes us.
Right.
Gives us a new heart. Gives us new desires. How many are getting some new desires? It gives us new passions. It allows us to see different, talk different, walk different. Because the Spirit of God is in us. Because we are accepted and loved by God. And that changes everything. Oh, that's good.
Yep.
Woo! I want to be a part of this church. Okay. The next thing is we're a community that serves one another. And I love this one. This is so dear to my heart because I believe that it's one of the things that the church does better than any other entity on the planet, but I also believe it's the thing that we can fail at so easily.
Yes.
Because we can so easily become like the world. And listen, the world's great at, loving on one another, and, I mean, you can go to any bar and see a bunch of dudes or a bunch of gals, and they're celebrating and they're high-fiving and they're hugging, but they can never do what the body of Christ can do for one another when Jesus is at the center in this koinonia fellowship. This is the sweet spot, and I believe that it is the North Star for our church, and I feel it every time I come. I have made some of my most precious friends at Heart Church, and I know that I will continue as well as you. And so this is it. Romans chapter 12, verse 10 says this: love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. So when we talk about serving one another, we're not just talking about like, hey, let me help you move, although I'll help you move. And hey, will you come over and where's Melissa and Lance, and come clean the church. They're so awesome at that, like Amen. Such servants in this place. And listen, Jesus came to serve, not be served, so that's who we are. But there's something so much deeper than that, and it has to do with honor. And I'm gonna circle back around on why we use the word serve one another. But first I want to talk to you about honor. See, honor, and again, I've preached this, I'm going to continue to preach this, so if this is just like getting old to you, get over it, because this is awesome. Okay. Honor is not just holding your leaders in high esteem. Right? I mean, we know that the Bible teaches that, to honor those who are in authority, which is why it's so horrible that, the way that people talk about Trump or anybody else, not because they're perfect or necessarily even have to vote for them, but just because when God has established authority, we are to honor authority. It's biblical, and with it comes a blessing. Kids are supposed to honor their parents, honor your teachers, all that kind of stuff. So that's honor. I don't want to diminish that, but that's not the kind of honor I'm talking about. Because at its core, honor, and this is why it says outdo one another with honor, and another verse says honor all people. So honor isn't reserved for authority, although it's for authority, but there's this concept of honoring everyone, and it's because this is the definition. Honor is the recognition of value.
Amen.
So I don't honor you because you think like me, look like me, behave like me, believe like me. I honor you, or in other words, I treat you as somebody who's valuable because you are bearing the image of God. You have immense value in this house. Every person that walks in this door, every person that we see walking on the street is bearing the image of God and has immense value, and therefore we honor. And when we exercise this, when we treat one another as valuable, not because they're falling in line.
Come on.
See, we've all been in an environment where if you fall in line, then you're treated good. Right? And listen, at work or other places, like I get it, there's reasons for that. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about an honor that has to do with people seeing value deep inside of you that has nothing to do with your behavior. You don't have to behave here to be treated valuable. Let that sink in. You don't have to behave. You don't have to believe to be treated as somebody who's valuable. And when we do that, don't miss this, and this is why we're calling it serving one another. When we do that, and when our actions follow this firm, deep-rooted belief that every person has immense value, then we are literally partnering with God to bring out the image of His Son in each person. When you are seeing past people's dysfunction and quirkiness, listen, we're a quirky bunch. Oh my gosh, we are a quirky bunch.
That's good.
I mean, I wish each of you had a turn standing behind this pulpit and looking out. And you'd be like, dang, y'all are quirky.
Come on. Amen.
I mean,
I agree with you.
wonderfully, beautifully diverse in every possible way. And I absolutely love it. I mean, that's Heather and I's absolute passionate dream, is that we would be diverse in every possible way in this church. And I believe that represents the kingdom and it represents the Father's heart. Yeah. So So we're not going around going, isn't this such a cool community because we're all the same, right? We all can connect so easily. No, it's so hard to connect at that intimate level with people that's just like, no, you don't see it the way I do. And you don't do it the way I do. And yet when you're able to see past all of that and get to the value, the God-given value, I'm telling you, something supernatural takes place.
Amen.
And it draws out the best in that person. And it's not their behavior. It's the image of God. And that's what Heart Church is about. And that is serving one another.
Amen.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to get saved. Okay. The last thing is this. We're a community. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. So, well, celebration. In 2019, Heart Church grew from 25 to 50 adults connected to this life that I've been talking about.
Glory to God. Glory to God.
Come on! Every one of those people are valuable.
Yes.
They're not numbers, they're not stats. And that's what makes this place Heart Church. The next thing is we're a community that adopts our city. And man, there's so many things that I could say about this, but first I want to read Matthew chapter 25, starting verse 37. Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you a drink? When did we see you, a stranger, and take you in, or naked? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? And Jesus answered them, surely I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of these, least of these my brother, you did it to me.
Amen.
I've said this to many of you. Since I've had the privilege of pastoring Heart Church, and Heather and I have been in full-time ministry in 5 different churches in full-time ministry for almost 20 years. And great churches. But I can say this, and this isn't to say anything positive or negative about those other churches. This is just about me personally. I have had the privilege of doing what I would consider actual ministry more in the last year and a half than I have in my entire life. It's so easy, and you know this with anything. Anytime something gets more complex, you end up just managing, right? The bigger the church, the bigger the organization, it's so easy to lose the essence of like what it's all about, and you just end up managing the status quo. And that was one of Heather and I's passions in planting this church, is that we never want to lose sight of what it's about, which is one of the reasons why we have these 3 pillars, and these are going to be the gauges for our church. As long as we're the pastors, is how are we doing it loving Jesus? How are we doing it simply sitting and beholding Him? How are we doing it calling out that immense value in one another and seeing every person and not allowing people to slip through the cracks? And then finally being a church that's actually doing ministry, and our city takes notice and goes, no, our city's better because you're here. You've heard me say this, we're divinely placed. I believe it's very biblical, that idea that each of us are divinely placed. In fact, it says in Acts chapter 19 that God ordained the time and the boundaries, the seasons and the boundaries for every person to live. So it wasn't an accident that you landed here, you live here, the time frame and the boundaries where all of us live. Now, we're not going to all live here forever, right? Well, we're not going to be in San Diego maybe forever, or this church forever. That's not what I'm saying. There's no fortress around these walls. We're a welcoming and ascending church. Hello, right? When people come, we celebrate. When people leave, we celebrate.
Right.
Because this is a stream. It's not a pond getting murky. It's not a cul-de-sac where you land. We also want it to be ascending launching place. Okay, but that being said, today we're here. We're here. And churches were designed for cities. You look in the Old Testament, Paul never wrote a book to a city, to a church that was out in the middle of nowhere with no people. He wrote it to Ephesus. Ephesians is wrote to Ephesus. Why? Because there's a church in Ephesus to reach people. And God planted us here, and you are divinely placed. This church is divinely placed, and as long as we are here, we are divinely placed by God to bring the good news of Jesus to people that need it. And I love just landing the plane on all of this. We started with Mary seated because the work is finished. So what I love about this church is that none of us are on the merry-go-round or the treadmill of life trying to just do enough good to feel good about ourselves. Do enough good that will please the Father. Do enough good so that at the end of our days, maybe we'll get to heaven. Like, this is not what we're doing. We are seated with Christ in heavenly places. That we are secure in who we are, and the transformation that happens in our life never happens by our behavior modification, but it always happens as we constantly get up every morning and we behold Jesus and allow Him to transform our lives into His image. That's the goal, His image. But it's from that place that we get up and we go, man, I'd sure love to do some good with all this good I have inside of me, as an overflow. And so Mary was seated, and again, I preached this message before. Mary was seated, and then a couple of chapters later, we see the same Mary not seated. Everybody else is seated around the table. The disciples. And Mary comes, and she has this oil that's worth 1 year's wage. 1 year's wage. So think about what you made in 2019. Right? 1 year's wage. And she had this perfume. And that, we don't have perfumes like that are worth that kind of money. But back then it was. So again, this is a bar of gold. Comes in and breaks it and dumps it on Jesus to anoint Him for burial. A whole year's wage wasted. And the disciples, they all said, oh my gosh, Jesus, why would you let her do this? This is such a waste. You ever had anybody tell you or ask you why you give so much to the church? And not even financially. Just why do you give so much of your emotional attention? Why do you give so much effort? And why are you so committed to this thing? It's the same thing the disciples were saying. Like, what? Why would you do that? You know how much good you could do with that? And Jesus' response was, no. This was so profound that everywhere the gospel's preached, this story will be told. Because Mary, the one that had the self-awareness to sit and just be with me because she's not trying to work her way into heaven. Out of that place, she got up and she took the most expensive thing she has and she poured it on Jesus. And you know what I'm sure that she would have said if we were there? She would have said, you know what? I'd give more if I had it. I'm not working. This is not work. Right? That's why I love Lamont up on the drums. This isn't a gig for him. This isn't work. You can see it on his face. It's an overflow of like, oh my gosh, if I had more to give, I'd give it. And this is the heart of the house as we look at pouring our lives out for the city. We're not on the treadmill of our works, but it's an overflow to say, oh my gosh, God, you've been so good. And you've loved me right where I was, and you delivered me out from the pit. And so whatever I've got, I want to give it.
Yeah, that's right.
Whatever I've got, I want to give it.
Amen.
And that is so fulfilling. In fact, it's the only thing that does fulfill, is a life of service that's from an overflow of the love of God. That is the gospel. That's the gospel. If you ever wonder why you don't have joy in your life, ask yourself, have I received the love of God and am I allowing it to flow out of my life? We are a river where the love of God flows to others. Heart Church has so generously made a huge impact. 2019, the church gave $7,100 for local outreach to help those in need. And we were able to give $1,000 per month to Foursquare Missions and church planting. Out of the overflow of your heart and generosity to bless people. 2020, we're going to do more. God is so good. Jesus. I want to pause for a moment and recognize that you are the head and the cornerstone of this church. And we are simply partakers of your goodness and conduits of your love. I thank you for every person that has joined our community, that has so generously given of their lives. And that's what makes Heart Church home. A place where people who don't have family and people who maybe have struggled finding their place in the church or struggled to encounter and receive your love can find family. And so Jesus, we want to conclude 2019 by celebrating and look forward to 2020 with anticipation for all the new things you have stored for us as we keep ourselves centered on these three ideas. And we give you praise for that in Jesus' name.
Thank you, Jesus.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. God bless you.